So, is cultural difference a problem? For decades, the whole world of international business has pretty much treated it that way. The standard thinking is that it just creates friction and headaches. But what if it's also a secret weapon? A powerful source of strength that can spark real innovation and creativity? Today, we're going to dig into why this double-edged sword has been seen so one-sidedly for so long. I mean, check out this quote from Geert Hofstede. This guy is an absolute giant in the field, so his words carried a ton of weight. This wasn't just some random opinion. It basically became the default setting for global business. The core assumption was that if you mix cultures, you're managing friction. It was all about playing defense to avoid a total disaster. But what if that whole problem-focused view has been kind of like wearing blinders? What if by only focusing on what could go wrong, we've been missing out on all the good stuff? That's the big question at the heart of what we're breaking down today. Okay, so let's start with that dominant view. This negative take wasn't just a hunch people had. It was treated like a fact, and it shaped how whole generations of managers thought about doing business around the world. You see, this whole negative vibe got baked into these core academic ideas. You've got these fancy-sounding terms like cultural distance and liability of foreignness, but honestly, they all boil down to one simple underlying assumption. That difference is a disadvantage. It's a risk you have to manage, a cost you need to minimize, a problem you have to solve. Okay, so this is where things get really interesting. A couple of researchers, Günter Stahl and Rosalie Tung, they started to get suspicious. They wondered if this dominant view was actually, true. So they launched an investigation asking a really simple question. Is the problem really in the cultures, or is it in the way we've been studying them? And to figure this out, they did something huge. They went and analyzed 1,141 different articles, and these articles spanned 24 years of research. And get this, they weren't just random articles. They were all from the single most influential, top-tier journal in the entire field. So we're talking about looking right at the heart of the establishment here. And what they found, wow, it was stunning. Okay, so check out this chart. It shows you the assumptions the researchers started their work with, and the results are just staggering. For every single paper that even considered cultural differences might be a good thing, 17 papers just automatically assumed they were a bad thing. A 17-to-1 ratio. I mean, that's not just a small preference, that's a massive, deeply ingrained bias. But, and this is the huge twist in the story, when the researchers looked past those assumptions and at the actual data, the picture was completely different. Yeah, okay, about half the studies did find some negative effects, but the other half, they found mixed, neutral, or even purely positive results. This is massive, right? The real-world evidence just didn't back up the overwhelmingly negative hype everyone was starting with. So you might be thinking, who cares about a bias in some old academic journals? Well, it actually matters a lot, because these ideas don't just stay locked away in a library. They form the basis of what's taught in business schools, they train the next generation of managers, and they end up influencing billion-dollar corporate strategies. And this one-sided story? It has a real cost. When you're only ever looking for problems, you're totally blind to opportunities. You stop seeing diversity as this amazing engine for new ideas and innovation. For decades, we've become experts on the so-called dark side of cultural differences, while pretty much ignoring the bright side. Okay, so how do we fix this? How do we break out of this negative mindset? Well, the researchers suggested a whole new way of looking at it, and they borrowed a really powerful idea from a totally different field, organizational learning. It's a lens that finally helps us see both sides of the cultural coin. It all starts with a change in mindset, one that's inspired by this approach called positive organizational scholarship. Basically, instead of always asking, what's broken and how do we fix it, this view flips the script and asks, what's going incredibly right here and how can we get more of that? It's a simple switch that reframes cultural difference from being a liability to being a potential asset. This brings us to the main event, exploitation versus exploration. It's a really powerful way to think about this. So think of it like this. Exploitation is all about getting better at what you already do. Making the assembly line faster, more efficient. It's all about refinement. But exploration, that's about discovering totally new things to do, inventing the next big product, finding that breakthrough idea. It's all about discovery. And here it is, the big insight. Cultural diversity hits these two things in completely opposite ways. For exploitation, those routine, predictable tasks, yeah, diversity can cause some friction. But for exploration, when you need creativity and out-of-the-box thinking, that same diversity becomes your secret weapon. It becomes a superpower that fuels innovation. And you can actually see this bias playing out in the kinds of research people do. Studies that look at the big picture, like multinational corporations and global supply chains, they tend to be in that exploitation mode where efficiency is king. And surprise, surprise, in that world, cultural difference looks like a problem. But the research that zooms in on small teams, where creativity is the name of the game, well, those studies are way more likely to see cultural difference as a huge plus. So all of this leads us to a much smarter, more accurate way of looking at it, the double-edged sword. It means we can finally stop asking the wrong question. It's not about whether cultural difference is good or bad. The reality is, cultural difference isn't inherently good or bad. It's a tool. And like any powerful tool, say a double-edged sword, it can create challenges for efficiency, for sure. But it's also this incredible source of creativity and growth. Its impact, whether it's positive or negative, depends entirely on the job you're trying to do. So here's the bottom line, the thing you can actually use. If your goal is exploitation, like making a factory floor run like clockwork, then sure, cultural similarity can help everything run more smoothly. But if your goal is exploration, designing a breakthrough product or solving a really wicked problem, then cultural diversity is no longer a liability. It becomes your most valuable asset. Which leaves us with a new question that completely reframes the entire conversation. Is cultural difference a liability you have to manage, or is it an asset you can leverage? For decades, the business world has been obsessed with the first half of that question. But what all this research shows is that the greatest opportunities, the biggest breakthroughs, and the most exciting innovations, well, they're waiting for the people who figure out how to master the second.